I'm Dina.
And I'm Charlotte.
Welcome to the Grim Curriculum Extra Credits.
Hello. How is it going?
It's going really well. Do you want to know why?
Do tell.
Robert Pickton is dead.
Yes, he is.
Oh my. I was like obsessively Googling it when he was in the coma because I was like, is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? And then you had sent me like immediately after it happened, you sent it to me. I was shocked.
Literally, I was sitting at work. I was just taking a break to flick through my phone, and it was one of the first things that popped up on TikTok of all things. And I was like, Dana, he's dead.
Right?
Whew, lower than a cockroach. Good fucking riddance.
You know, it's funny because we've had it happen a few times where we've talked about terrible people and we say bad things about them. And we'll get comments that are like, well, you don't know the whole story, or like, that's not nice, or like whatever. And it's like, I am relieved because I have not seen a single person that is upset about this in any way. Everyone is like, good riddance. I'm so happy, especially here in Alberta, I find, because we're not in BC, but we're so close.
Oh,
that
yeah.
especially a lot of older people that I know are just thrilled about this.
Exactly. And I think the only time I've seen any conflict in emotions on his death is that he was supposedly writing this tell-all book that was going to feature some rather distinguished names.
I heard
so
that.
there is a bit of a conspiracy theory that wonders, was he taken out because he was about to upset some people?
Yeah.
Which I could absolutely see. That being said, I'm relieved he's gone, and I'm sure a lot of the families of his victims are very relieved. They finally gotten closure, and especially even for the families of women who were suspected to have been murdered by him but never proved, even they are getting some relief from his death.
I have some quotes from victim family members I want to share right away, but basically with him, for those of you who don't know, he was convicted of killing 6 women.
Yeah, but he himself has bragged about killing way more than that.
Yes, he was charged with killing 26 women.
Yes.
And the number could be as high as around 100 women.
Which is insane because he's famously quoted as saying, I got 49. Wow, I wish I'd made it 50.
Right?
Or, words to that effect.
Yeah, exactly. But they're saying now that he could have been connected to even more, which we probably will never find out about because of how badly this entire case was fumbled. And fumbled it was. But I want to talk a little bit about what happened.
Yes, please.
All right. So the fella that killed him, I wanted to try to do some digging on this guy.
Yeah, all I saw was that he was a 51-year-old fellow inmate. That's all I have seen about him so far.
I did some digging.
Okay, let me hear it.
His name is Martin Charest, and his nickname is Spike.
Whoa.
Okay, and so he is yet to be charged. They're calling it a major assault, and it left Pickton hospitalized and in a coma. The prisoner is now under investigation. His timeline of how long he spent in jail is huge. The first kind of instance that I could find was in 2007, where he pled guilty to 3 counts of armed robbery and was sentenced to 8 years. In 2014, he was sentenced to 48 months for uttering threats while serving time at that institution. And then in 2022, he was serving time near Quebec City, where he was charged with more than a dozen counts of uttering threats to cause bodily harm or death. And he pled guilty to all 13 of those counts and was sentenced to 36 more months.
Like, he was like, yeah, I said it.
Right? He's like, yeah,
say it again.
What of it? So the way that he assaulted him, I have a quote here. This is from a man named Rick Frey, who was the father of one of the victims.
Okay.
And he said the guy that assaulted him stabbed him first with a toothbrush in the neck.
Oof.
And then broke a broom handle. And when you break something like a broom handle, you always get a sharp end. So he took the sharp end and stuck it into his nose, up into his skull.
Whoa. Now, I had heard rumors of this broom handle. I didn't realize he had given him the mummy treatment with it.
Yep.
Woof. I mean, not a pleasant way to go, but if anyone had to go that way, I would have picked Willie
I
Pickton.
thought it was gonna be a little bit more like how Jeffrey Dahmer was killed, with he was
Yes.
just, like, beaten or stabbed or whatever, but, like, this guy, like, this is a I wanna call it a theatrical death, really,
I
because I mean,
mean,
that's pretty gory. I will say I couldn't actually validate this, but a rumor that I heard was that while he was in the coma and he was being taken care of by nurses and medical professionals, when you take care of someone like that, it is your job to take care of them.
absolutely.
And I have so much respect for anyone that can do that, but apparently the medical health professionals, gave him the nickname Pinocchio
Oh.
because he got stabbed.
Oh, it took me a second to make the connection. Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, again, kudos to any medical professional that's working in an
Yes.
institution like that because I'm sure you come across some characters,
Yeah.
shall we say, that you may not think are particularly deserving of your help and care,
Yeah.
but that's what the Hippocratic Oath and the oath to do no harm is all about, right? Like it
Yeah,
doesn't
absolutely.
matter what this person has done. It is your job to help them to the best of your ability. But I think in my personal opinion, in my humble
Mhm.
opinion, you're allowed to poke fun
At Robert Pickton,
at
yes.
Robert
And that's
Pickton.
why, like, I've had a bunch of friends, like, text me and message me and, like, tell me, like, really dark jokes about him dying, and they're like, "I hope this doesn't offend you." And I'm like, "You know what? I have a line. We all have a line.
Sure.
Robert Pickton is fair game."
Yeah, honestly, I would never accept any kind of making fun of at the expense of his victims
Of
because I think
course.
that is tasteless, senseless, and quite frankly, just abhorrent.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm sorry. Robert Pickton, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, he's dead.
See you in hell,
He
sir.
was 74 years old. And I have some more quotes from
Hmm.
Rick Frey here. He said, I guess he suffered at the end somewhere along the line, but he still, in my view, hasn't suffered enough for all the deaths that he caused all the women that are gone. Rick's wife, who was the stepmother of Marnie Frey, who was one of his victims, she said, there's not a day that goes by that we don't think about her. And I have a few of her remains. Hopefully they're her. I'm not 100% guaranteed.
That's really upsetting and very sad. But a lot of the families of his victims have said the similar thing where it's like, yeah, we all they were able to find were some bones from her hand.
Yeah.
They're not getting complete skeletons here,
No, they're
which
not.
made it so much more difficult on top of a lot of other things, like Dina said, that were fumbled, but it made it incredibly difficult to identify any of these poor victims.
Especially when there were so many over such an extended period of time.
Yes.
She also said, at least we got a little bit of accountability from Marnie, but all the other families got nothing. There's a lot of families that never had their day in court and never will. And how can they? I can't imagine how they feel about this. The Frey family and other victim families are now fighting the RCMP because the RCMP is planning to return or destroy thousands of pieces of evidence that were seized for the case. We talked about this when we discussed Robert Pickton's day parole eligibility.
Yes.
And that's a really big controversial thing because they've essentially given up on this case. Whereas a lot of other cases we've seen that get solved years after the fact, it's because the investigation continues. And here it seems like they're like, well, he's dead.
The perpetrator is dead, case closed, which is absolutely not fair to the people left behind
No.
because they don't, yes, they're getting some closure in the sense that the perpetrator is dead and no longer walking this earth. But then you don't really get the answers that you were seeking because a lot of the families involved with this have been told that their loved one, their daughter, their sister, what have you, is a victim,
Yeah.
but there's never been real proof that they were.
Yeah.
And so they're hoping that getting closure by his death is a thing. But what if it wasn't him? At the same time, that
Exactly.
question never gets answered then.
And Rick Frey, he also said, I would like to say that just because Picton's gone doesn't mean that this case is over, which I completely agree
I
with.
also agree.
He says, at the end of the day, he's gone. The families are suffering still. I can't let it go. I can still fight. I mean, the downtown east side has never changed. It's just as bad now as it was 20 years ago when Marnie was down there. Has that changed? No. Has the drug thing changed? No. Will there be another serial killer?
It's a very scary place to be. If you've ever been to
Yep.
that side of Vancouver, you don't want to walk alone through there. It's pretty sketchy.
I spent a weekend there.
Woof.
This was a few years ago. I was working marketing and they sent me to Vancouver to do, it was like some anime event or
Okay.
something like that. And so I had, my hotel was like on the other end of town. They booked it really poorly and I didn't have a car
Oh
because I flew
no.
there. And
Yeah,
so I'm
yeah.
taking like the
Public
public
transport.
transit. And I, like an idiot, this is my first time traveling alone, actually. I didn't really know what to expect, and I didn't do any research on anything, and no one told me. So at one point, I get off of my bus or off of the train or whatever it was, and I'm walking down the street, and I just stepped into this. And
Oh.
the shock, I can't even explain it. And I remember very vividly, like, this almost sounds like something from a movie. It was so crazy. I see all these people just camped out on the streets, and then I see a woman in the middle of the road and she's just like screaming at everyone. And then she starts kind of coming towards me and
Oh
screaming at
no,
me.
no, no,
And
no,
I'm
no,
just
no.
like, I was 23 when this happens. It was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of like make my way over. And then all of a sudden I hear someone call Medina. And I turn around and it was this girl who I used to model with, who I hadn't seen in
Whoa.
years. She was a model makeup artist and she was working there as a makeup artist. And we just happened to run into each other and she's like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Yeah, no kidding. Like,
I
what
was
are you
like
doing in
wandering the
these
street.
streets?
She's like, "What are you doing?" And she like took me over because I'm so directionally challenged. I got lost.
Same.
And she like took me over to the convention center. And it was just like being dropped off on another planet.
Yes, I believe that 100%.
I have never seen that much human blood everywhere and that much just open drug use. It was both horrifying and very, very, very heartbreaking.
I think sometimes when you think of places like that, you think of LA and like Skid Row, or
Yeah.
maybe like New York or
Mhm.
Detroit or things like that. The way Vancouver is presented to most of the world, the way Canada is presented to most of the world is clean, Great White
Yes.
North, polite, and then you drop down into the areas where Pickton was crawling.
Yeah, I had a very idealized Vancouver in my mind of just, beautiful houses and you've got, water everywhere and it's
Stanley
gorgeous.
Park
Yes.
is beautiful and it's by the ocean and you can go whale watching.
Yep.
And there's all this. And then on the flip side is, well, it's that two sides of the coin. You have
Mhm.
the beautiful glowing gem of a city and then the dirty underbelly. Very Gotham City, if you will.
That's my tangent for the day, but that was kind of my experience with that because you hear about how scary this area is and how it's still really bad. At the end of the day, so few people give a crap about these women. I hate to be pessimistic, but I don't think we're going to see justice here for the majority of these people because we already didn't when he was convicted. And I don't know what names he had. I don't know what he was going to say, but with how this case played out, I wouldn't be surprised if he could have easily said, like, "Oh, they knew I was doing this all along."
It wouldn't surprise me, especially because there were a lot of people visiting the Piggy Palace.
Yep.
In fact, even if we've talked about this before, but you talk about people that you know,
Yes.
and they're like, "Oh yeah, I know someone that used to party at the Piggy Palace,"
Yeah.
and it's like, whoa. And it wasn't just your average Joe off the street. It would not surprise me if there were some dignified people that also spent time there that he was going to rat out, essentially.
I heard Nickelback played there.
Ooh. Oh no.
Yeah.
Chad Krieger, what are you doing?
What are you doing, Chad?
Oh.
Anyways, yeah, we couldn't start the episode any other way other than to talk about this. Robert Pickton case for us is definitely coming up. We're going to cover it. We've kind of been waiting for him to kick the bucket. I have a few books I'm trying to get my hands on that are a little bit more challenging. I really want to get the book that he wrote. Apparently it's like so poorly written, it's almost impossible to comprehend.
That doesn't shock
I've
me.
read snippets of it, and it's like he like ran it through a thesaurus app before he did anything else because it's
Mm.
just so convoluted. But yeah, that I know a lot of you have been wondering if we're going to cover him, and we will. We definitely will in time. We just need a little bit to put that together, and we'll get her going.
Absolutely. I think obviously with Paul Bernardo and stuff like that, we've got a few notorious people in Canada, which tends to shock people.
Yeah,
But I would say, hands down, of the modern times, Robert Pickton is the most well known Canadian serial killer.
with by far the highest potential count as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Whew.
Hey,
Okay.
you know what? He's dead. We can at least say that. We can at least say that. At least he is not living a good life in prison, which he never was, but sometimes they do. I always think Catherine Knight.
Mm.
But
There was a part of me that thought that he might come out of the coma. Now I know potentially what happened to him. Obviously, that was a very unlikely possibility,
yeah.
considering he basically got a broom handle lobotomy.
Yeah.
I'm glad he didn't.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll leave him there and we won't talk about him again probably until we cover him.
And then we're going to have to talk about him a whole lot.
Then we're going to talk about him a lot. And then we're not going to
No,
talk about him.
we're never going to talk about him again. All right. I know you've got some it's not lighter hearted, is it? But you've got some somewhat interesting stuff here.
Yeah, I don't have any true crime things per se today. I thought I would start my section with a little volcano update. I kind of hinted at that during our regular episode.
We almost need like a little like newscaster, like do.
Totally. And I mean, from what it seems like, our little town of Grindavik in Iceland, where the Blue Lagoon is, very famous, very picturesque, is having a hard time with these volcanoes. And the scientists are saying that they are likely to continue to erupt for decades to come.
Oh my goodness.
The residents have not been able to return to their homes at all since going on back in November now.
Wow.
They're allowed to go in on occasion, but it is highly advised against staying overnight. So if you need to go in and pick things up from your home, they're allowing business owners to collect valuables and stuff and protect things.
Yeah.
But only just a couple of days ago, the 8th volcanic eruption in the last 3 years began with quite a bang.
Wow.
The situation is doing okay. They have their big walls up kind of around to deflect the flow of lava, and so far so good.
Mm-hmm.
They have evacuated the Blue Lagoon and the power station there just as precautions, because you never know. But there is a lava field up by the defense walls on the west side of town, and if you look at the aerial views or the videos, you can see that the lava is essentially surrounding the town.
Wow.
As of right now, I believe there's only one way in and one way out because the other roads have been completely cut off. The current fissure that has reopened up is the 5th one since December, and it's about 2.5 kilometers long, and it's continuing to grow. It's cracking open further and further.
Holy crap.
And I highly recommend checking out video footage or the images, because it's not an eruption like we imagine where you have the volcano and it's all spewing out of the top, kind of like a mountain. It's literally a huge crack in the land, and it's spewing up to 50 meters high.
Oh my god.
A wall of lava.
Holy crap.
Because it rained a lot there recently, so it's creating a lot of ash as well, which they were a little bit concerned about affecting flights out of there, but so far so good. No flights have been canceled. One thing I did want to note is that I don't have a whole lot of information on them, but apparently 3 people have refused to leave the town altogether, according to local news.
Gotta be somebody.
Officials, including the chief of police from Grindavik, again, strongly emphasize that all those who are in or near leave the area and get to a safe distance. So yeah, it's still going, and like I said, scientists are reckoning it's gonna be at least a decade before it stops. It has slowed in the last couple of days since that big eruption, but it's still continuing to flow.
Wow.
So whether or not the residents of the town will ever get to go home, I don't really know.
It's interesting because you just said it, and I've never really thought about it this way. Because honestly, I get all of my volcano news from Charlotte now. Because I like learning along with you guys, but it's not what you would expect when you hear about a volcanic eruption. Because you
No.
expect like boom, it's done. There's lava
Yes.
everywhere, but this is like a slow boil
It's
almost.
continuing on. There was intense earthquake activity before the eruption. So they predicted it, they knew it was going to happen, which, I mean, obviously they're keeping a very, very
Yeah,
close eye on it. But the 4,000 residents of Grindavik, like I said, they have not been able to go home in any permanent way.
you can only predict so much, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And these fissures continue to open. One thing I will say before I wrap this up, the lava flow in the first 4 hours of the eruption that happened just a couple of days ago was around 1,500 cubic meters a second,
Whoa.
which is pretty damn fast. And it was much higher than the speed of the March 16th eruption. So, by that sort of logic, they are getting more powerful as time
Yes.
goes on, but they tend to have that big eruption and then it slows down a little more. It's yeah, it is what it is, I guess.
You know, as terrible as it all is, it's good that they're monitoring it the way that they are. And that, because you said, there's really only one way in, one way out right now. It's good that they have evacuated everybody but the three people, really,
Yeah.
because then it's not going to take anyone by surprise and turn into a mass casualty event. You know what I mean?
No,
Like,
all the important things, like I said, they're trying to move them out there. As for rebuilding, I don't think there's anything in the works per se, because how can they when the
yeah,
lava is moving closer and
yeah,
closer?
no point.
So, as for the people that have been displaced, I'm not really sure what the Icelandic government is doing to deal with that.
Yeah.
Definitely something I will look into, though.
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
That has been your June volcano update. I guess technically end of May, beginning of June. So I'll let you know if anything fires off during the summer months,
Yeah,
I
as always,
guess.
please keep us posted. I've heard from a few people they like the volcano updates, and
Okay,
I
I'm
really do
glad.
too, because like, wow.
I mean, it's just my nerdy little thing. I know it's not particularly gruesome, but I always find Mother Nature so awe-inspiring and
Yeah.
interesting. And the Earth is a really, really cool place. I often think about how we sort of take it for granted in more ways than one. But I think of like if a little alien spaceship was gonna land and sort of have a look around, they would look at the residents of Grindavik in Iceland and be like, "You live on an active
Right?
volcano?
What are you doing?
What are you doing?" Or like even the folks in Hawaii and stuff. It's like, "Wow, you guys live at the bottom of this thing that could destroy you at any moment?
Yeah.
Are you crazy?"
I think we're so lucky to not have to deal with any of that stuff here, right? Because I mean, really, here we just have horrific snow, which we'll bitch about all day, every day. But there could be so many other things that are just ready to take us out.
Absolutely, there could be definite complications. I have I have another sort of not geography, geology. This morning, I swear to God, when I was doing my notes, I was like, geometry, geology, geography. It's geology. So I'll talk about that in a sec. Again, not super gory or horrific or anything, but just food for thought. And then I have a fun little one for you to kind of wrap up my section.
All right,
So,
I've got some gruesome stuff here.
okay,
So
let's go then.
I think we talked about this before. I can't remember now. I was gonna go back and listen. I don't know if we talked about it or I wanted to. Do you remember those TikTok videos that were like from the point of view of a Skyrim NPC?
Yes.
Okay. So that guy has been sentenced for double murder.
Yes, I had seen that. I remember when he was arrested.
Yes.
So now it's all come to sentencing.
Yes. So Ali Abulaban, also known as Jin Kid on TikTok, he had nearly 1 million followers. He is from San Diego and he has been convicted by a jury for the 2021 murders of his estranged wife and the man that he thought she was cheating with.
Oh dear.
Her name was Anna Abdullaban, and his name was Rayburn Barron. And in court, he basically was bawling his eyes out. He was crying. He was wiping tears away as the gallery cheered after finding out that he was found guilty.
Woof.
He confessed to killing the two during the trial and has been in prison since October 2021. He is scheduled to be sentenced on June 28th and could receive up to life in prison.
As he should, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder using a firearm and a special circumstance charge for killing multiple people. The two were having issues in their marriage at the time of the killings. She was living in the home and he was living in a hotel. She basically told him that he had to leave the apartment, so he moved out and he began stalking her. I will say before I go and say what he thought, there is proof that he was cheating on her
Okay.
and he was physically abusive towards her multiple times. So we do know this.
Okay.
Now, he was convinced that she was cheating on him. So when she was not in the apartment, he made his way in and downloaded an app with a listening device on his 5-year-old daughter's iPad.
Jesus.
He was able to listen in on what was happening in the apartment when he heard another man's voice.
That's so creepy.
He went back to the apartment and he shot the man 3 times and struck her in the head until she was dead. Hours before the murder, she texted him saying, "I want you out of my life once and for all."
Women who are leaving an abusive situation or have left an abusive situation, it is one of the most dangerous times when it comes to domestic violence.
Yeah.
And clearly he was unhinged if he was stalking her and going as far as to monitor her through his child's iPad.
Right?
Christ.
Yeah, so he heard the voice, he sped over to the apartment, opened the front door, and he saw the wife with the man, and that was when the murders took place. So in court, he said, and I quote, "I couldn't take the fucking betrayal. And the next thing I know, I'm shooting and I can't stop."
Yeah, okay, buddy.
His defense detailed his mental health struggles, childhood trauma, and his mounting cocaine addiction.
Wow.
And they say that all played a role in the shooting. He testified that after moving to San Diego, the relationship became strained due to the fact that they were both partying a lot. They were both
Okay.
using a large amount of drugs. And the man who he also murdered was part of a group of friends that they were all kind of hanging out with and partying with, essentially.
Gotcha.
He actually took the stand in his own murder trial, which
Never a good idea.
a good idea, no. He admitted to physically abusing her in the past, and he said, "I was just very impulsive." He said that he had punched and pushed his wife on prior occasions and urged her against contacting the police or seeking a restraining order in connection with those incidents.
I hate when they use impulsivity as an excuse.
Yeah.
Do you know how I know it's not an impulse? Because you didn't beat the shit out of the gas station attendant when you saw them.
Right?
You didn't hurt anyone in the bank or the grocery store.
Yeah.
You specifically hurt your ex-wife or your wife at the time.
Yep.
That's how I know it's not an impulse, because it's directed.
You were already spying on her.
Exactly.
Right? So after the shooting, he called his mother, father, and a friend to confess and sent them photos of the victims' bodies.
Oh my God.
He later called 911 and told the dispatcher that he found the victims dead, and here is the absolute worst part. He then picked up his 5-year-old daughter from her school, and shortly before he was arrested, he told her, "I hurt mommy."
Oh my God. This poor kid.
Yep.
She went to school that day like she did any other day.
5 years old.
5 years old. Dad picks her up. Oh, guess what? Your mom's dead.
Yep.
And I did it.
Yep.
Oh my God, that poor kid. It also reminds me of the fella that brought up the whole, is the dress blue and black or gold and white? You remember that whole situation? I could be wrong. I believe I have talked about this before. He also went to jail for, I believe, murdering his partner.
I remember that.
So it goes to show that if someone
Yeah.
has like a few minutes of fame on YouTube or whatever, doesn't mean they're a good person.
No, and I did a lot of digging to see kind of like I'm you guys know I'm not huge on TikTok, so I went to kind of find some of the videos and I had seen the NPC one, but
Mm-hmm.
in my search for the videos, his TikTok has obviously been taken down, but I found a whole bunch of like him and her doing videos together and it's just like it's so senseless and so sad, and because of that, not only are two people dead, but this 5-year-old has essentially now lost both of her parents.
Yeah, she has been orphaned in one way or another because he's gonna get years.
Yeah.
And if I were her, and I mean, she's a kid, so she has a lot of growing up to do still, but I would not want to see him ever again.
No,
I
no.
certainly wouldn't be visiting him in prison.
Yeah.
Um, she's going to need a lot of therapy to get over this. And I mean, will she ever really? Probably not.
Yeah.
Ah, poor kid.
So yeah, that's my super depressing story of the day for you.
Okay, well, I'll, I guess, lighten it up a little bit
Please do.
with something that is called the Kola Super Deep Borehole.
Ooh.
We're going to Russia for this one.
All right.
This hole is it's a record-breaking hole. How many times will I say hole in this segment? I guess we're about to
A
find
whole
out.
lot.
A whole lot. But this hole is about 9 inches in diameter.
Okay.
It is abandoned, but it is the deepest man-made hole in our history.
Okay.
It's over 7 miles deep.
Whoa.
It is deeper than Everest and Mount Fuji stacked on top of one another. It is deeper than the Marianas Trench by about 10,000 feet.
Whoa.
And I can hear you guys asking already, what is the purpose of this hole?
I am asking, what is the purpose of this hole?
The purpose is we wanted to see how deep we could go.
That's honest.
So I saw this on TikTok, as I see many things, from a TikToker that honestly doesn't need a shout out from us. She's fantastic. Her name is Katie Tutrone, and she talks about weird science things. So of course I went down the rabbit borehole, if you will. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this super deep, useless at this point hole because it's abandoned. It was abandoned quite a few years ago because they couldn't get any deeper, so they capped the sucker off and abandoned it.
Wow. Can you open it and throw like pennies down it?
It's only 9 inches wide, so if you didn't know what you were looking for, you would absolutely just walk past it.
Wow.
And because it is abandoned, the buildings around it are all crumbling and everything.
Mhm.
It doesn't look like anything of note at all. But if you were to find it and you find the little, like, I guess manhole cover, it's like bolted
Mhm.
down. If you had the means to open it, you could open it and drop a penny down if you really wanted to.
That's crazy.
It is, like I said, it is 7.6 miles deep or 12.2 kilometers. That's 40,230 feet. And for perspective, I mentioned the Mariana Trench. That's 36,000 feet deep. So this borehole takes the cake from that one. It does go through the Earth's continental crust, which is on average about 25 miles thick, depending on where it is.
Yeah.
In the air. Sometimes it gets up to quite a bit thicker, sometimes it's a little thinner. The next layer is the mantle, which is about 1,800 miles thick. So we haven't made it to the mantle for the simple fact that the deeper you get, the hotter it gets.
That makes sense.
And the reason they stopped at 7.6 miles is because it was simply too hot for the drilling equipment to continue on. It kept burning through their drill bits, basically. So the top layer of granite they got through pretty quick. Some different layers, it took a little longer depending on the material. But while they were boring through as much as it was just to see how deep we could go, they were getting samples from different layers. It was telling us a lot about fossils and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's just there. This hole into the earth is just there. Now, don't worry about it being dangerous. When I was telling Cody about this, he was like, what if it causes like a fracture?
Yeah.
It's basically, when you consider how far it is to actually get to the center of the earth,
Yeah.
it is a pore on the face of the
Wow,
world, basically.
that's crazy.
It's really, in the grand scheme of things, not that important at all. Where they got to, they expected it to be about 100 degrees Celsius or 212 Fahrenheit, but they were very wrong because at the deepest point, it's about 356 degrees Fahrenheit or 180 degrees Celsius. So she's hot.
She hot.
She's hot down there. There are some other deep examples of holes in the earth because bitches be digging.
They do, yeah.
There is the 100-year-old Bingham Canyon copper mine in the mountains near Salt Lake City. Now that has a pit that's about 3/4 of a mile deep, so about a kilometer and change. That, however, is about 4 kilometers across. So it's
Holy
just
crap,
a
okay.
massive crater of a
Yeah.
hole, right? Whereas this, like I say, is like a pore on the surface of the earth. It's capped. If you're ever in Russia and you're looking to go see it, I guess you could. They don't recommend it because I don't think they actually want you dropping pennies and marbles down
No,
it.
I don't think they would care for that.
It was abandoned in 1992 after the fall of the Soviet Union, so I guess technically it's not a Russian hole, it's a Soviet hole. But this is the building that currently surrounds it.
Wow.
So it's pretty inconspicuous.
Those of you on Patreon, go take a look at the video. You would never guess.
No, it looks abandoned. Quite frankly, it looks like someone has shelled the shit out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the big questions that people tend to have is we have gotten like billions of miles into space, right?
Yeah.
Like we've sent probes to Pluto, for God's sakes. Why is it that we can get that far out into space, but we can't get to the center of the Earth we're on? It's kind of like we've gotten real far into space, but we've also never seen the depths of some parts of our oceans.
That's just it, yeah.
And it's simply because we don't have the technology to. And at this point, 30 years later, since they've capped it, no one seems to have any interest in taking it up again or starting a new one. So, yeah, that is the Kola borehole in Russia.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
Kola with a K, in case you're wanting to look it up for yourself.
Kola. Love it.
Kola, yeah.
All right. So, speaking of the depths of the ocean.
Oh.
I have fun news for you, and this is my favorite story that I've heard in a long time.
I think I know where this is going already, and I'm gonna chuckle.
U.S. billionaire plans submersible trip to the Titanic wreck. Wait a minute, didn't we hear this last year?
Oh man, I mean, hey, if the goal is to sacrifice a couple of billionaires a year to the depths of the ocean, I think that could be a program I could get behind.
I have to say, I am very excited about this.
Isn't it to prove that the industry standards are now safer than they were previously?
Here's the thing. I'll get to that.
Okay.
But when the Titan happened, we talked about it on the show. Go back and listen to that.
I mean, who wasn't talking about that?
Yeah. The whole thing was a mess. If you've seen photos of what the submersible looked like, if you've seen, it was controlled with like a Logitech controller, really not the most high-tech piece of equipment. I think they're gonna do it this time.
You think it's going to be a success?
I do. I've got high hopes for this. So it is being planned for 2026. So we won't have an update for you all for a hot minute.
They're working on it.
Yes. Larry Connor, who is 74 years old, is putting $20 million into his new submersible with the company Triton Submarines. Don't let that confuse you with the Titan submersible.
Oh my god.
So close enough, very close names. They're planning, like I said, in 2026. He's partnering with a man named Patrick Leahy, who has over 40 years experience with submersibles as the joint CEO of Triton Submarines.
Okay.
So before the whole OceanGate thing happened, Patrick basically went off to say, like, don't do this. You're not doing it right. This isn't what you're supposed to do. You're all gonna die.
So he advised against the original expedition in the first place.
He did. He described what OceanGate did as predatory.
Wow, and I'll agree with him on that one.
He was close friends with one of the people who did die in that disaster, who was 73 years old. And he said that Stockton Rush, the guy who owned OceanGate, who also died, was so manipulative that he could, quote unquote, convince someone who knew and understood the risks to get on his contraption of a submersible. He said in an interview with the Wall Street Journal, I want to show people worldwide that while the ocean is extremely powerful, it can be wonderful and enjoyable and really kind of life-changing if you go about it the right way. So the new submersible, like I said, is known as the Triton 4000, and the 4000 in the name refers to the depth that it can reach, which is slightly more than the Titanic. The
Okay.
Titanic sits at 3,800 meters.
Well, that's a good thing already. I like that.
Yes, so it has a smaller capacity. This one can only fit two people,
Okay.
so it's only going to be the two of them. They are not planning to offer commercial trips to the Titanic.
I think that's a good idea.
It is. However, they do currently offer commercial ventures to the Marianas Trench
Cool.
for $750,000.
I don't think I'd be getting on that one either.
No, no, thank you. So he'd wanted to build this for a really long time, but he was saying that the technology to do this didn't exist until very recently, which is why he decided to do it. He has been thinking about it for over a decade. And he said that someone approached him and said, "We had a client, a wonderful man. He called me up in the wake of the OceanGate disaster and said, 'You know what we need to do is build a sub that can drive to Titanic level depths repeatedly and safely and demonstrate to the world that you guys can do that.' And the Titan was a contraption."
Mm.
It is being advertised as the world's deepest diving acrylic sub, and its gull wing design is going to allow it to maneuver easily even at very deep depths. The Titan had a controversial carbon fiber hull, and it's believed that the repeat trips over time weakened it and caused the explosion or the implosion, sorry, to happen.
I remember when the whole Ocean Gate thing was happening, and I went down this YouTube rabbit hole on the material that the Ocean Gate sub, the
Yeah.
Titan, was made out of, and how Stockton Rush basically bragged about it being carbon fiber, and oh my god, it's so strong. There's nothing stronger than carbon fiber. But as it turns out, it's not the correct material for that depth and
Yes,
pressure.
exactly. So Triton submarines, they have gone down to the Mariana Trench multiple times. The trench, the deepest part of it, is sitting at 10,984 meters deep, which is more than double how deep the Titanic is. So they have
Okay.
done more than twice this distance. They are capable, I feel like, and honestly, they have a ton of safety accreditations. They have experts working, and I highly recommend checking out tritonsubs.com where they share previous dives that they've done all around the world. It's actually very cool. It's a pretty big thing to say you're going to do successfully, especially after the catastrophic event of the
Yeah.
last people that did
I
it.
mean, that's a tough act to
It
follow.
is. However, I'm going to go on record as saying that these are the best people for the job.
They certainly seem better equipped, better
Yeah.
prepared. From what you've just told me today, I would have more faith in them. But I think the burn of Ocean Gate will be a tough one to get over for many, many,
Yes.
many, many years. I mean, speaking of the Titanic itself, there were people that never sailed ever again because of what happened
No.
to the Titanic, right? So if people weren't necessarily lining up to try it again, I certainly wouldn't blame them. I know I would not be.
Mhm.
But already the way they're going about it, they're saying, look, this is not open to the public.
Yeah.
It is a two-man vessel. We're going to see how it goes. Here are the precautions we've taken. Here's why it's better. Here's why the last one was basically a bucket in the ocean with a
Mhm.
propeller on it. Um, I have higher hopes for them having heard all this, but the universe can be a fickle bitch, and she
Yes.
has the potential to do the most funny thing ever.
I am going to show you a picture of what they plan on it looking like. The thing with all of this is, again, he's really doing it, I don't want to say out of spite, but he's doing it to say, "Hey, that guy fucked it up. Let me show you how it's done." And I
Yes.
mean, his friend died on this. Like it's terrible. So I'm gonna show Charlotte a photo of what it's gonna look like right away here as soon as my tablet here cooperates. And then I will show those of you who are watching on Patreon. So you all know how the Ocean Gate one looked like. You just said bucket in the ocean. I
Yeah.
mean, that's really what it looked like. So this is the
Oh, wow.
what they plan on it looking
I mean,
like.
obviously, these are just renders for now, but they're
Yeah.
far more more futuristic looking. I would have far greater trust in those, I think, even just from the appearance of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is interesting to me that the gentleman that's running this new expedition is also in his 70s, because either I feel like that could go one of two ways. He either has a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience
Mhm.
that has come with being that age.
40 years worth in the industry.
Absolutely. He is probably one of the most educated people in his field.
Yep.
And to actually put it into action and test it out, like you say, going down into the Mariana Trench and all that stuff. On the other hand, I find it unusual that a man of that age would be interested in risking it. But he seems very confident.
Hey, and I mean, honestly, maybe he's at the point where he's like, I've done what I've done. I've lived a good life. Let's fucking see what happens.
That's very true. And in that sense, maybe I wouldn't want to go down with him, because like you say, if he's like, well, if it all goes tits up, I've lived a good life.
right.
And I'd be like, excuse me, I'm still young.
yeah, exactly. And I always remember, because before OceanGate happened, I had been reading about that for years.
Yes, well, I remember when we talked about the Titanic, before we even really
Yes.
knew of all of this OceanGate stuff, and how we were saying, there's going to be an expedition, you
Mhm.
get to go on the research ship, it's going to cost $250,000, and we were like, oh, that's so interesting. Fast forward to OceanGate, oh, oops.
Anyone that knows me knows that the Titanic has been an obsession of mine since I saw the movie. Since I was 7 years old, I've had, a huge obsession with it. And for me, I was so jealous of these people that were going to get to see it.
Yes.
And I said to so many people, I'm like, oh, if only I could go down there. I want to go down there. And then I watched it as it happened, and I was like, ooh, like
Really puts things into perspective.
it
for
does,
you.
yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and just say I will not ever do that.
I
Sorry.
guess we'll keep an eye out. What did you say, 2026?
2026. Yep, that is what they're saying right now. So for all we know, it could be sooner, it could be later. This is all in the works, but they have officially announced it, and I wish them all the luck in the world. TritonSubs.com. Seriously, check out the website. It's very cool. And yeah.
I guess we'll see how it goes. I do. I hope them all the best, because if there is a way to do it correctly, I want to see it done.
Yeah, of course.
I do not wish awful things upon them, but the little voice in the back of my mind is like, but what if though?
Right? I wouldn't be jumping to do it after OceanGate.
Absolutely not. Okay, so to wrap up my little section
Okay.
today, I thought, it's not a game or anything like that, but I figured we haven't talked about some slang or anything like that in a little while. And while this isn't quite that, I went down the strange old British laws rabbit hole. And I have a
Mhm.
few fun ones today. Now, these are all laws that are still very much laws today. So they were implemented way back hundreds of years ago. I've got a few different eras for you, but they are all in place today.
Okay.
The first one I thought was good. If you're an adult who's been a kid, which is all of us.
All of us.
Did you ever play? Now, when I was growing up, this game was called Knockador Ginger.
Okay.
But it's also known as Knock Knock Ginger, or like Nicky Nicky Nine Doors.
Ding Dong Ditch.
Ding Dong Ditch.
Yeah.
The premise is you run up to someone's house, you ring the doorbell, you knock on the door, and then you run the fuck away. And haha, when the person answers, it's like, ooh, what happened?
Yeah.
Silly, but I think we've all done it as kids.
Oh, yeah.
So in England, it's actually illegal to play.
What?
The law from 1839, so in the early-ish 19th century, makes it illegal to, and I quote, willfully and wantonly disturb any inhabitant by pulling or ringing any doorbell or knocking at any door without lawful excuse. So it is actually
Wow.
illegal to play Ding Dong Ditch in the UK.
Oh my goodness.
The next one I have for you is a little more serious.
Okay.
And it's the Madhouses Act of 1774. And this came into play because people were basically starting their own private lunatic asylums. You can understand how this was probably not a good idea. Essentially because anyone with the money, if
Mhm.
you had place to store a quote unquote lunatic, you could just take them in and be like, I'm running a madhouse now. And you could just
Shouldn't laugh.
essentially collect people on the street
Yeah.
that you would be quote unquote taking care of, i.e., exploiting and abusing.
Of course.
And so, because of the Madhouses Act of 1774, this restricts property owners to one lunatic per residence. If you wanted to start a collection, you have to apply for a license. So, while most private asylums began operating in the early 1600s, the status and powers of such madhouse keepers was really undefined until 1774. So, for much of the 18th century, there was no state regulation. Like I said, you could just have people living in your basement and be like, yeah, I'm looking after them. You could hold them against their will.
Yeah.
This all came to play because there were some notable cases, including, say, a wife imprisoned by her husband
Mhm.
because, and I quote, she lacked passion and was acting indifferently within the bedroom.
Oh my god.
And two young girls were locked up by their parents to halt love affairs that their parents did not approve of. And they were
Ooh.
basically saying, we're not crazy. They just want to lock us up because we're doing things that they
Yeah.
don't want us to do. The Madhouses law came into effect. So if you wanted to have or house one mentally ill person, you are well in your rights to do so. Any more than that, one must require a license.
That is wild.
Another fun one is, and again, you would think this was pretty common sense, but as per the Metropolitan Police Act from 1839, it is illegal to fire a cannon within 300 yards of a residential property.
That's fair.
So you would just need to pace it out to 301 yards.
Yes,
if
exactly.
you wanted to fire one off.
And fire away.
And my favorite, and this is cool because I went to the legislation.gov.uk website to see this actual law back in the words that it was written in. This is the statute forbidding bearing of armor in Parliament. This goes all the way back to 1313 and basically said, look, lads, if you want to show up to Parliament in all your finery and all your, whatever, that's fine. But we cannot be having swords and armor in the Parliament building. And I'm going to do my best to read the official King's statement regarding the matter. And bear with me because it is in quite Old English.
Let's hear it.
So, the King sendeth greeting. Whereas of late, before certain persons deputed to treat upon sundry, debates had between us and certain great men of our realm, amongst other things it was accorded, that in our next parliament after provision shall be made by us, and the common assent of the prelates, earls, barons, that in all parliaments and other assemblies, which should be made in the realm of England, forever, that every man shall come without all force and armor, well and peaceably to the honor of us, and the peace of us and our realm. And now in our parliament prelates, earls, barons, and the commonalty of our realm, there assembled, to take advice of this business, have said that to us, my goodness, it goes on.
There's so many unnecessary words in there.
It belongeth, and our part is, through our royal signory, straightly to defend force of armor and all other force against our peace. This is all one sentence, by the way.
It sounds like it is, yeah.
And at all times when it shall please us, and to punish them which shall do contrary, according to laws and usages of our realm, hereunto they are bound to aid us as their sovereign lord at all seasons, when shall need be, we command you that ye cause these things to be read afore you, in the said, there to be enrolled, given at Westminster, the 30th day of October.
Holy crap.
And so, yes, to translate that again, basically the king was like, show up how you want, but you're going to be peaceful, you're not going to bring swords, and you're not going to bring armor. We're going to talk about this like the gentlemen we are. And that was one real long sentence.
That I'm like looking at it on your tab, it's like this big. That's crazy.
God. And the crazy thing is at that particular time in 1313, that letter from the king to Parliament stating this new act would have been actually in French.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it was translated from the original like Old French,
Yep.
which you can see if you go to
You're
legislation.gov.uk.
not gonna read that to us in French?
No,
No, no,
absolutely
no.
not. It was hard enough to English. UK English is my
Yeah.
firstborn language, and I still couldn't fucking get
Oh
through
my
that.
god.
So,
Yeah.
but yes, don't wear your armor in Parliament, basically. And like I
Wow.
said, these are all still laws that exist today. So if you were to swan up to the Houses of Parliament in your shiny metal vest, you would be turned away
Wow. That's crazy.
and potentially even punished, because it does say that it is our right to punish you when you do the contrary to us. So it's saying if you do wear armor, if it shall please us, we will punish you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it all makes sense, doesn't it? Huh.
So yeah, there's some fun laws for you. I do like the old laws. I love them from all over the
Yeah.
world. There's some really good US ones that I
Yeah.
love. Certain things, it's like, you know, if you're gonna have a horse, you gotta have a bale of hay with you, and
Yep.
you know, things like that. And it's not that they are particularly inact, but no one got rid of them.
Right. So they're just still
They're
there.
still there. So if you really wanted to fight about it, and there was a lawyer that would be willing to take on your case and set precedents, you absolutely could.
I don't know if I'm imagining this, but I think at some point I read that it's illegal to ride a moose.
That sounds right. It
Yeah.
should be
It
illegal
should
to
be
ride
illegal to ride
moose,
a moose.
honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I just like made that up, if I actually heard that somewhere, but I feel like that's a thing. It should, if again, if it's not, it should be. But yeah.
And you don't quote me on this, but there is a law in the UK that if two houses back onto each other,
Mhm.
the windows have to be a certain distance apart because they didn't want anyone to see anybody naked in the other house, basically. And the way they determined what that distance was, this is going to crack you up. Basically, there were two guys. One stood in the kitchen window of one house,
Mhm.
and he made the other guy walk away, and he told him to stop when he could no longer see his nipples through his shirt. So that's how they were like, okay, that's a good enough
Further,
distance.
go for okay,
Yeah,
okay, you're good.
you're good. You're not obscene anymore. I can't see your nips. So
Oh my
just
god.
the barmy laws that we put in place. You know, whenever you see one of those rules, you see it at like the swimming pool or in the mall or whatever,
Yeah.
and you look at it and you're like, I never would have thought about that, but someone gave you a reason to put that
Yes,
sign up.
exactly. I mean, this has been a long episode, and I have a little bit of a longer, strange, and unusual death.
Okay.
But with that, it is time for our latest and greatest strange and unusual death. Ooh, I'm making that one spooky because it's spooky.
Ooh, I'm ready.
All right. Today we're going to talk about a fella named Thomas Lynn Bradford who passed away on February 5th, 1921.
Okay.
Before we talk about how he died, I'm going to tell you who he was.
Okay.
Okay. Thomas Lynn Bradford was a professor and a man of many ventures. He was a one-time electrical engineer. He was an athlete. He was an actor. And in the 1920s, very shortly before his death, he began studying and lecturing about the occult.
Okay.
He really liked to focus on the aspect of the afterlife.
That'll get you.
We have talked about this before. I think we talked about it during like very early on when we discussed the Bloody Benders.
Okay, yes.
So what had happened in this case was World War I had just happened and people were feeling very spiritual. A lot of people had lost others. They were desperate to find out if there was some kind of connection between the living people and the dead and if you could talk to them. So he was a sane person by all accounts.
Okay.
But the closer he got to his death, he kind of started to go a little wonky. And at one point he wrote, all phenomena are outside the domain of the supernatural. So he figured with that he could prove theories that he had using science, but he knew that the way he wanted to prove it, he couldn't do it alone.
Okay.
So he put out an ad in the newspaper and he used the name Professor Flynn, and he said that he was looking for someone interested in spiritualistic science.
Well, sir, if you're already putting out your little newspaper query under a different name, me think you know that what you're up to is maybe no good.
Right? You didn't have to use a fake name, my friend. So this ad drew the attention of a woman named Ruth Starkweather Duran. She was not a big spiritualist, but she was an avid researcher, and she knew really nothing about this. So she kind of saw it as an opportunity to learn more because she liked to learn.
Okay.
So she responded to the ad, and then her and Bradford started meeting face to face. He presented her with the following experiment. She was to make a plan with him
Okay.
that after his death,
Oh.
he would communicate with her.
Saying like a specific phrase or something that so that she would know it was him.
Exactly.
Okay.
When he originally approached her with what he had in mind, he kind of thought that it would send her running for the hills.
Fair enough.
But she decided to stick around. And the last time that they met was February 5th, 1921.
Okay.
He had typed out a manuscript on his typewriter and put it right next to it. They made up a plan that he was going to end his own life.
Oh wow. So he's not saying like when I finally kick it in my old age, he's like, I'm gonna do it myself.
Yep.
Whoa. That's dedication to your experiment, sir.
Yeah.
Wow.
And for those of you who are hearing birds in the background, we're recording a lot earlier in the day, and that is Pietro the lovebird, who I just gave a new box to, and he's very excited about his box. And I think that's what we're hearing.
He's like, fuck yeah, new box.
Oh, he loves his boxes. All right. So he told her, I am going to end my own life and I'm going to communicate with you. And that's going to prove my theory that there is a link between our life and the afterlife.
Okay.
So he informed his landlord that he was going to do this.
My good sir, on the morning of Monday, do not fear, I shall be dead.
If you hear a ruckus, ignore it. So he said that if anyone were to call for him to tell them that he was out and that he wouldn't be back until very late. He then turned on his heater, blew out the pilot light, turned up the gas, and laid down in bed.
Whoa.
And he passed away. His body was discovered by the landlord the next day. The gas was still pouring from the heater. And they found the final note. And that note said, and it is through the scientific facts that I propose to demonstrate clearly the phenomena of spirits and prove that all the phenomena is outside the domain of the supernatural. They were like, what the fuck?
That is a valid response to that.
So the Detroit police, they began to look for an explanation, and that was when it linked them to Ruth Duran, who they decided to talk to. And she said that, yes, they had met and that he was going to prove the afterlife, but she had no idea that he was going to kill himself.
Oh no. So she, like I thought, okay, well, when he dies, and I get this message, could be 10 years, could be 15 years, could be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's probably like, okay, so this is a pretty low commitment thing for me.
Right. And even if she did know, because some sources say that maybe she did know, she probably didn't think he was going to do it.
No. It is interesting to me that he was a very scientific man.
Yeah.
He was a professor. And I understand the experiment and wanting to know what's in the great beyond.
Of course.
But at the same time, you didn't give yourself a get out of jail free card if the experiment didn't go right. You can't walk away from this one and be like, well, shucks, let's try it again. Let's change our whatever and try again.
One and done.
One and done.
Yep. So when she talked to the police, she said, I am his friend. If he can cause his spirit to come back to Earth, I believe his spirit will come to me first. A week after he took his own life, she started to claim, hey, I have this feeling. I'm going to hear from him, but I don't think I will because he's very weak.
Okay.
So she had hope. Papers started to report on the story.
Okay.
And they started approaching her. And they were urging spiritualists to concentrate on him and to assist him in reaching out. And what they did was they all agreed that they were going to put a focus effort in at 9 p.m. every night to try to get them to be able to communicate.
Okay.
So every night at 9 p.m., a whole bunch of spiritualists, they got
trying
together.
To like boost his signal,
right?
Basically.
They were like, let's do it. Go, go, go. Now, at 9 p.m. one evening, Duran was sitting in her parlor in the dark with 3 witnesses, and suddenly she put up her hands to her temples. She said, "Turn off the lights," and told someone to start writing. According to her, he finally arrived.
I don't like that.
And she said, "I hear his voice. It is faint, but it grows more distinct. It is the professor."
Oh.
And from that, they were able to piece together the following message from the professor. I see the skepticism on your face.
I'm just seeing the smirk on your face, and I'm just like, what is this message?
I want to say this in like a ghostly voice because that's how I read it. So he said, "I am the professor who speaks to you from the beyond. I have broken through the veil. The help of the living has greatly assisted me. I simply went to sleep. I woke up and at first did not realize that I had passed on. I find no great change apparent. I expect things to be much different. They are not. Human forms are retained in outline, but not in the physical. I have not traveled far. I am still much in the darkness. I see many people. They appear natural. There is a lightness of responsibility here, unlike in life. One feels full of rapture and happiness. Persons of like natures associate. I am associated with other investigators. I do not repent my act. My present plane is but the first series. I am still investigating the future planes regarding which we in this plane are as ignorant as our earthly beings of this life are just beyond human life."
That is a lot. Can you imagine that whole paragraph coming through a Ouija board? You'd
Right?
be there all day.
So at 10 p.m., so this was all at 9, the lights were brought back on, and Duran was super flustered, and she was like, "Oh, what was that? What was that?" And then suddenly she fainted.
Okay.
And they resuscitated her, and they said, "Are you sure this is what he's saying to you?" Because she was basically talking for him, and this person was like jotting it down.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah.
And she said, "I am convinced. I've never heard a spirit voice before. That was the professor, without doubt."
There's a part of me that really hopes it is true. And you know what? Maybe it was just those one of the things. Maybe he was able to do it. Maybe he did. He spoke to her. On the other hand, I would hazard a guess that the media attention got a little bit too much from Miss Madame.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to go with it.
Well, she's probably like, I think it's one of two things. Either she didn't want the investigators and everyone to be like, "Bitch, you are responsible for this now because he is dead and you were involved."
Yeah.
But if there was a way that she could say, "Oh, we proved he was right,"
Yes.
then the involvement isn't as terrible. And then the second theory, which I personally think is the correct one, is she saw the opportunity to make some money and she took it, like many of the spiritualists of that day and even nowadays do. It's a longer death than I normally have for you guys, but once I read it, I saw like just a blurb of it, and then I was like, I need to know more.
I very much enjoy the whole era of the sort of spiritualist movement and the ectoplasm and the seances around. We've all seen the photos or the depictions where it's the Victorian sitting room with the tablecloth and everyone's sitting holding hands and the lights are down and there's a candle or you know, and then the strange mist appears and speaking in tongues and all of that. It's very fascinating. I love the drama. I love the theater of it all. A lot of it has been debunked.
Of course.
Houdini himself was like, no, this is all bullshit. And several others. But there's just, I don't know, there's a fun to it.
I don't know, man. I feel like if I have ever lived a life that was not this one, there is a part of me that wishes it was that. Because I could see myself sat in a table with everyone being like, "And now we will talk to ghosts."
I think you would make like an excellent like tarot reader or
right?
Something. Yes.
I mean, really.
I love that.
Right? Either that or I'd end up in the lunatic asylum like we talked about, which I think is a lot more likely.
Yeah, that's
it's a fine line between
true.
Super successful spiritualist and people thinking that you're crazy because you don't look at your husband anymore.
Yeah, successful spiritualist or lobotomized 50s housewife.
Make it go either way.
Absolutely. I do like that one though. I will say I was shocked that he chose to take his own life in the name of this experimentation. I genuinely thought he was gonna wait until he just passed away of natural
Nope.
causes,
No one's
but
got time for that, Charlotte.
I mean, when you're dead, I guess you got all the time in the world,
Yeah.
so why not start now?
Yeah, I guess, eh?
The professor.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, if you want to see a full video version of the podcast, check out our Patreon. There are perks for all of the tiers. There's perks for the free tier. So check it out,
Mhm.
patreon.com/the grim curriculum. But we've got a very, very grisly and gory case coming up for you on the regular show. So brace yourselves because it's going to get icky.
Yeah, if you're a fan of true crime throughout the ages, you've definitely heard of this fella.
Oh, yes.
There's no way you haven't. And he is, like Dina said, he's a gruesome one. He's going to make your skin crawl.
Mm-hmm.
And that all being said, thank you so much for listening. This has been the Grim Curriculum. Extra credit.